Hello learners, today we are going to learn about features of a text and its various forms. In this module, we are going to learn about features of a written text that differentiates it from the spoken text, features of a text that make it complex, understanding the component parts of a text, functions and purposes of a text. We'll also learn about interactive reading and choosing the right kind of text to facilitate interactive reading. We'll also learn about scanning and skimming and how organization of a text works, and also about text structures. We know that all kinds of texts, written or spoken, primarily entail discovering and evaluating information. However, the written word is seminally different from the spoken word. Brown, in his book Teaching by Principles: An Interactive Approach to Language Pedagogy, lists 7 characteristics of written language that differentiate it from the spoken language. They are as follows. Number 1, written language is permanent. This gives the reader a chance to go back and forth the reading and also read the text at their own rate. Number 2, written text is distant and the author is not accessible. Number 3, due to this ambiguity of the written text, it needs a lot of inference making, interpretation and reading between the lines. Number 4, written language has more complex structures with longer clauses. Number 5, the written text also enjoys a variety of lexical items. Number 6, it also has a higher degree of formality. And number 7, a written text does not carry meaning by itself, and therefore it is up to the reader to bring information, knowledge, emotions and experiences to the printed word. According to Brown, there are 2 categories of schemata: content schemata and formal schemata. The former refers to our knowledge of people, the world, culture and the universe, whereas the later refers to our knowledge of the structures of texts. Thus, a written text with all its complexities achieves its fruition only when a reader decodes its meaning and either deciphers the meaning that the author has intended or gets a different meaning from the text when Z is unable to get the writer's encoded message. But what are the features of a text that amplify its complexity and intervenes in the meaning decoding process between the text and the reader? Namely, they are of 3 types: quantitative features, qualitative features, and the connections that can be made between the text material and the reader of the text. Let us discuss them one by one. Quantitative features. These are the features such as unfamiliar words, number of syllables, and length of sentences. If lexical content is largely unfamiliar to the learner, the text will be difficult to understand and too much mental energy will be expended in trying to figure out the meaning of the unknown words, resulting in frustration and lack of interest. Thus, as teachers, we should attempt to use and prescribe texts in our classrooms depending on the Lexile score. This would help us match a specific text with a suitable level of readers who can grasp it. But what is the Lexile score? The Lexile framework for reading is a scientific approach that places both the reader and text on the same developmental scale, making it easy to connect the reader with books targeted to their reading ability. The intention to identify this score is to arrive at the reading comprehension sweet spot where reading materials provide an ideal level of challenge to the readers while maintaining comprehension and interest. Qualitative features. Qualitative features refers to the levels of meaning and purpose of a text organizing framework, or structures that provide content such as chronological order, cause and effect, compare and contrast, description and problem solution, language, visual supports such as graphs, pictures, maps, and finally, the readership or the audience for whom the text is written and how the author addresses the knowledge demands with their expectations of readers' knowledge. And finally, the readership or the audience for whom the text is written. Thus, we can clearly observe how qualitative text features and reading comprehension are closely linked. The various parts of the text enable the readers to determine what is in the text and what is important to them, sometimes even unconsciously. We all know that a text generally contains these parts: title, page, table of contents, index, glossary, heading, subheading, keywords, illustrations, diagrams, etc., along with the main body of the text. So as teachers, it is our duty to make students sensitive and aware of these features of the text so that they can draw meaning from the text. Before we move on to discussing the last feature that determines the complexity of a text, let us quickly discuss the components of a text and its specific purposes. The title. What does a good title do? It gives us clue about the main topic of the text. Then there are table of contents, and a well-organized table of content should tell us where to find specific information. Texts also have chapters, which help to organize the information of the text into a pattern that makes it easy to comprehend and also makes it recall-worthy. Again, texts can have subheadings. Now, subheadings are structures in various ways. Subheadings can give cues that reveal the logic of text organization and also bring attention to the key concept the text deals with. Texts also have glossaries, which might be a list of key or new words that the text introduces to the reader. Apart from these components discussed, the texts can also have graphics, illustrations, and labels to accentuate the meaning of the written word. Finally, let's talk about the feature, the connection between the reader and the text. This last feature of the text is very, very important. This, as we understand, heavily determines the complexity of a text. The reader's motivation to read, their prior learning and the knowledge about the subject, their attitude and readiness to learn must be considered. A reader can therefore approach a reading from a psycholinguistic cognitive orientation, which views reading as a mental process during which the reader constructs their own representation of the text, or from a socio-cultural orientation, which emphasizes the importance of varied social and historical context in text production and text reception. Either way, the process of reading is different for different readers on different texts at different times and with different purposes. The reason for this variation is that readers differ with regard to their schemata, and also that writers may presuppose many points of which the readers might not be aware of, as readers and writers may not have a common assumption of the subject. Next, we are going to discuss about the various functions and purposes of a text. Being aware of the function of a passage is important to comprehend it. Students ought to be trained to find out whether the text aims at convincing the reader, giving information, or asking for something or some action. The common reasons or goals for writing or speaking that text creators could have are to persuade, that is, by using arguments, the author tries to influence the reader to accept their point of view on an issue. The author can also push for a specific expected action from the readers. To inform, that is, to give instructions, compare and contrast, share cause and effects, give new information, or to entertain, that is, using narrative, anecdotes, descriptions, or humor to amuse, delight, and appeal to the imagination of the readers. In our classrooms, we must constantly nudge our students to read and think about what the author expects or wants and why the author might be sharing a particular piece of information. In a conversation, one can ask the other interlocutor if he or she does not understand something. But in reading, the author is unavailable. Therefore, effective readers have to get involved in active interrogation of a text to fully comprehend its meaning, as Nuttall would suggest in his work Teaching Reading Skills in a Foreign Language. He maintains that reading, like comprehension, is interactive. That is, readers and writers depend on one another. Interactive reading, in another sense, refers to a continual shift from one focus to another, now adopting a top-down approach to predict the probable meaning, then moving to the bottom-up approach for checking that meaning. Alderson and Bachman, in their Cambridge University book Assessing Reading, make a significant distinction between the process of reading and the result of that process, the product. The process refers to the interaction of the reader and the text, and what the reader can get as the meaning of a text, and this, according to them, is a dynamic process, similar to what Nuttall suggests. Therefore, both top-down and bottom-up processes are important, and it is the combination of these two processes that would facilitate an interactive reading. Though for beginners, reading mainly concerns decoding and deciphering individual words, or is an activity to learn aspects of pronunciation and speaking, but in most cases, one reads a text as to get the message or meaning that the author has intended. Gray, as cited in Alderson and Bachman, distinguishes between reading the lines, reading between the lines, and reading beyond the lines. The first refers to the literal meaning of the text, the second to inferred meanings, and the third to readers' critical evaluation of text. Alderson and Bachman contend that society values a critical understanding of text above the other two modes of understanding, that is, literal and inferred meanings. Paulson and Bruder, in their book Teaching English as a Second Language, Techniques and Procedures, identify the distinction between intensive and extensive reading as crucial to teaching reading. Intensive reading refers to reading through focusing on linguistic features necessary to decode the message. Nuttall also defines intensive reading as approaching the text under the guidance of a teacher or a task that forces the student to focus on the text. Extensive reading, on the other hand, is an approach to reading which resembles that of a native speaker's reading in their own mother tongue. The student reads at his own pace and level directly for meaning. This kind of reading happens, as Hedge suggests in his book Teaching and Learning in the Language Classrooms, when reading large quantities of materials and longer texts consistently over a long period of time to get a general meaning, and this can happen during class time or at home. Thus, a combination of intensive and extensive reading methods that results in an interactive reading process is emphasized by many scholars such as Brown and Nation. Next, we will learn about the necessity of choosing the right kind of text to facilitate interactive reading and how to go about doing it. Brown, in his work Teaching by Principles, highlights the role of affective factors in motivating learners to read. He opines that the love of reading has propelled many a learner to successful acquisition of reading skills. However, Making the right choice of the material has a great role in producing this love. Materials which, in Nuttall's words, have the suitability of content, exploitability, and readability. Wilhelm, in his book Improving Comprehension with Think Aloud Strategies, argues that text difficulty should be within students' zone of proximal development, ZPD. That is, they can read the text with assistance, but if the texts are within the student's zone of actual development or beyond their ZPD, readers may not read efficiently and critically, since the former belongs to an independent reading level that is not challenging and thought-provoking enough for the readers, and the later is at students' frustrational reading level. Thus, both content and features of a text are important criteria for selecting a text, and as teachers, we ought to endeavor to select texts other than the obvious textbooks prescribed in the syllabus that can be used for specific reading strategies or building academic skills. But how do we go about selecting such a text? Maybe the grid shown now will be helpful. Let us now understand something about techniques called scanning and skimming. Do you think we all use the same kind of reading techniques while going through all kinds of texts? Think. What do you do when you are searching for the train timing in a railway timetable? Or looking up someone's phone number from the telephone directory? Is this the same manner of immersion and involvement that we engage in while reading a poem or a news article? Surely not, right? There are two types of reading techniques used to assimilate information from different sources quickly: scanning and skimming. Scanning enables a person to look up specific information. Scanning enables a person to look up specific information from a text from any source, and that could be documents, maps, books, poems, newspapers, pamphlets, posters, etc. While skimming allows the person to quickly read through something to get the basic idea. So, when we are hunting for the specific information in the railway timetable or the telephone directory, we are basically scanning for the information. However, when we wish to get the overall idea about something we are reading, for example the poem or the news article, we skim through the text. The effectiveness and the speed at which we use these two very powerful techniques to quickly read through a text depends largely on the features of the text and its component parts, concepts we have already discussed in this module so far. However, it also depends largely on the text's organizational patterns and its structures, which we are going to learn now in this module. Organization of text and text structures. Texts in general, and particularly those which use passages and paragraphs, have an inherent pattern or method of presentation of information. It could be in any of the following patterns or might be a combination of the following styles: main idea and supporting details, sequence, comparisons, logical sequence. Keeney and Zimmerman, in their book Mosaic of Thought, Teaching Comprehension in a Reader's Workshop, point out that the meaning-making process for the reader operates at three levels: whole text level, sentence level, and word level. At the whole text and sentence level, readers are expected to form a clear idea about the key themes of a text, to pick out, underline, and even paraphrase sentences that contain the core ideas. And at the word level, they are expected to identify the key words or phrases that are essential to the core themes or ideas. Teachers can guide students to look for cues to the key themes from the title and subheadings, if any, in a text, and make their students aware of the content, words, or phrases that are repeated and get them to ask questions pertaining to these. Thus, being aware of the various types of text structures is seminal to the meaning-making process while reading. The term text structure refers to how information is organized in a passage. Within different disciplines, texts mostly conform to certain set structure types. For example, in literature, there is a range of narrative genres and exploratory texts. Scientific texts have expository structures, often containing description, comparison, cause and effect. A recognition of a text structure's types thus aids learners in forming text-to-text connections for a particular story genre and helps them in decoding the meaning rather easily. Some common types of text structures will be discussed next. Cause and effect. Some texts give reasons, that is causes, why something happened. The effect or the results of the effect of an action are explained in these texts. Science textbooks explaining geographical phenomenon or scientific experiments often use this structure. Chronological. In some texts, the information in the passage is organized in order of time. Simple fables and stories for young readers are often organized chronologically, where a sequence of events is described in a linear manner. More complex narratives, especially novels, move forward and backward in time, but even when the author uses flashbacks and fast forwards, the events still occur along a timeline. Non-fiction textbooks, especially in subjects such as history, present information chronologically, along with dates. The third pattern is compare and contrast. In this pattern of organization, the similarities, comparing, and the differences, contrasting between two or more objects, characters, ideas are explored. Graphic organizers are useful in graphically depicting the information in such texts. Number 4, order of importance. In this organizational structure, the information is expressed as a hierarchy or in priority. Lists that enumerate things or ideas often are placed in this sequence. Problem and solution. In such texts, a problem is described and the response or solution is proposed or explained. Editorials sometimes use this structure. Sequence or process writing. In this type of text structure, the information is organized in steps or a process is explained in the order in which it occurs. Most scientific experiments, descriptions of phenomena, recipes, and do-it-yourself articles fall in this category. This brings us to the end of this module. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.